Welcome to Our Hen House. This is Jasmine Singer.
And this is Marianne Sullivan.
And on this week's show, we have a very inspiring interview with someone who is truly putting it all on the line for animals. Matt Johnson is an investigator and the press coordinator with Direct Action Everywhere, which you might know as DXE. And among other things, he will be telling us about a rescue of a piglet in Iowa during the early days of COVID when they were shutting down the ventilation in factory farms. That has resulted in pending felony charges.
These people from DXE, they really are taking extraordinary risks with their own health and safety. And I'm just unendingly impressed. I just really love talking to him, and I love talking to him about it. So I hope you really enjoy this interview. These people care deeply about animals. And on the Flock bonus segment this week, I'll be continuing that conversation with Matt. And as always, if you're a Flock member, you'll get the link to the bonus segment in your email on the Tuesday after this episode goes up, or you can always find it on the Flock Facebook group. And if you're not a member of the Flock and you can afford it, you can join for $10 a month at ourhenhouse.org/donate. And I think I should mention in that context, thank you to everyone who has donated.
Thank you so much to everyone. And if you are a Flock member, please join us for our first Flock Friday Zoom calls, which are once a month on the first Friday of the month at 4 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. We just had one this past week. I will tell you about it next week, where we chit-chat about activism and dealing with this world. If we can be a little bit more, brighter as we're dealing with this dark, dark world. So if you're a member of the Flock, make sure you check out the Flock Facebook group for updates or write to us at info@ourhenhouse.org. And you can set up one-on-one conversations with me as well. By the way, those Flock Friday Zoom calls that we have, I heard Monica Chen, who was recently on our podcast. She's the executive director of Factory Farming Awareness Coalition. She said, I wish I had the quote in front of me, but she said something like, it's like a book club, only it's for animal activists, only it's podcast guests. And then during the Flock Zoom calls, we get to chat with one of the most recent guests. I love the way that she put it.
Yeah.
That was cool.
The Flock calls are really just such a joy.
We're a little bit into January 2022 already. Is it everything you thought it would be and more?
I'm sticking to having high hopes for this year. I think it's going to be great. I think it's going to be great, damn it.
Okay. Well, I hope those aren't famous last words, but last week I mentioned that my theme for 2020, possibly, if anything goes wrong, it's Marianne's fault. I mentioned last week that one of my words going into this year was going to be curiosity, and I stand by that. If you're curious about why, then think on it. I was also thinking that one of the words I would put into this new year is also flow, by which I mean like creative flow, kind of that flow when you're in work mode, but you're like really feeling it and that you're acting, you're acting your best. And also the flow of not holding on to things too tightly, being able to let go of things a little bit more easefully and gracefully, which is not something I have excelled at in my day. So I'm inspired by that.
How about Flo from Mel's Diner? She's going to be my inspiration for the year. Kiss my grits.
That didn't age you at all.
All right, everybody who recognized that reference, don't tell people how old you are because they'll be shocked. Because I'm sure since you're vegan, you look so much younger than you are.
I think if there was speaking of which, I think if there was some kind of a survey that went out to everyone who I talked to with regularity, most of them would be around 50. And everyone I know is either going through menopause or wanted to go through menopause. So I feel like they would listen to my word flow and it would have a totally different meaning for them.
Yeah, let's not even go there. I just, if you are in that age group and menopause is looming, I just want to say, I'm not saying this will happen to you, but one hot flash, that was it. Completely seamless.
You're going to get hate mail.
I hope you have the same experience.
I hope so too. I also have this new journal. I mentioned it last week, my Ink and Volt 2022 planner. And so I did spend some time writing in it during the last week, planning out
What is it called?
The brand is Ink and Volt. So it's INK and then
Ink?
the and sign. It's like a plus sign. Volt,
Ampersand.
VOLT. Yeah. No, it's not an ampersand.
It's not an ampersand. It's
No,
a
I
plus.
love an ampersand though. I'm an ampersand person. But no, this is not an ampersand one.
Ink and Volt. What does that even mean?
I don't know what it means, but it is. It is.
Are they paying us for this?
No, not at all.
Because they should be.
If they were, I would know what it meant. But anyway, I have a 2022 planner, and at the end, it has a lot of goal setting in it, like very elaborate planning. And as I'm doing it, it kind of starts with this big brain dump of like everything you want to accomplish. And then it sort of secretly manipulates you into tiering those things. Like, what are the priorities of those things you want to do? And I didn't even know I was doing that. I was like, I guess this thing. And then I wrote that. Okay, that thing. I wrote that. And then, okay, that thing. Then I was like, oh God, I just tiered it. But if someone had told me in advance, pick your top 3 and everything else is going to go way lower in your priorities.
Well, now you're telling everybody that.
Well, probably
don't reveal secrets.
People aren't as like, messed up about this stuff as I am. I want everything to be a priority. It's my big fatal flaw.
It's true. These people seriously have your number.
Yeah.
Wow, it was like they wrote this for you. It's like they called you and said, what does she need?
It's really hard and a little overwhelming, but I do think ultimately it's very good. It's like writing an outline for a novel. If one is perhaps writing a novel, that one might or might not be me right now. We'll let you know later when I feel more comfortable talking about something that might or might not be happening right now. But as you know, I'm a big fan of using fiction and creativity to advocate for animals, and I'll leave it at that. There's another book I got, The Daily Reflection Journal, also from Ink and Volt. And one of the questions in it was, who are 3 people you admire? What qualities do you have that you want to develop? And I gave it a lot of thought because my first instinct was to say like Bette Midler, Patti LuPone, because I'm a big old gay man. I
do admire both of them. I think
me too. I do too.
They're both really thoughtful people.
Oh, 100%. Like, and the most talented people. I got the Rose on vinyl. I was listening to it. Anyway. And so I wrote down 3 people, 2 of whom are vegan, Tabitha Brown and Tig Notaro, both of whom I've interviewed, by the way. And I think they're both they're such creative geniuses. Like, we look at their work, like Tig, we just think, oh, she's funny. And Tabitha, we're like, wow, she's really built an empire. But if you really look at what they're doing, it's absolutely genius. They are both creative geniuses, in my opinion.
Well, I think Tabitha has really had an effect on me. And I'm not even that familiar with her work because I don't really go on Instagram, and that's her major platform. It's just her personality, her nature, her positivity, her joy. I find it so, I don't even want to say inspiring. It changes my point of view in the moment.
100%.
It calms me down. It lifts me up. Yeah. To have a personality like that and be able to convey it to people. I wish I could be that person. Well, I tend towards the dark. Well,
but I think that some people might be born darker and some people might be born sunnier. But that being said, I do think people work at it. I think you have to overcome, you have to really rise above. And to some extent, when I think of Tig Notaro, those are things I think of with Tig Notaro, who suffered a lot of, loss in her life and suffered a lot of difficult, sort of unexpected health challenges and all of these sort of turning around, just unexpected course corrections. And what I love about her is that she is able to really weave in her veganism and her worldview into, you don't even notice it's happening. It's like, wait, did she just say something about veganism on Star Trek? Things like that. Or she's on this comedy special and suddenly she's talking about animal rights. What? It's just brilliant. And I love them so much. So it's a good thing to think about if you're listening to this and you're seeking some inspiration. That might be something to think about. Who do you admire and what are some qualities that they possess? Yeah.
And why? What are the specific qualities that maybe you're looking for right now and that is drawing you to that person? And you mentioned the curiosity was something that you really wanted to foment in the coming year. And I thought a lot about a theme for the year, and I've landed on something that I think most people will think, well, that's pathetic.
Marianne, I'm curious. What is it?
I've decided to have fun.
Oh, no.
Challenging. Really challenging. But I thought about it.
Yeah. Tell me what that thought process was like for you, because I'm curious.
I mean, things have been so dark, and for a lot of us, and I'm not a person who naturally has a lot of fun. I don't, there's not that many things I enjoy doing. Like I have comfort, and it's not that I hate life at all, but it tends to be like, watch TV, read a book, like have fun is not something I really work at. It doesn't come naturally, but I realized that it really encapsulates one of the most valuable themes of activism. And that can make me kind of do it. Who wants to pay attention to people who aren't fun? Who wants to hang around with people who aren't fun? And fun may sound like a stupid word. Maybe you should say joy or fulfillment or something. But no, it's fun. I don't want a semi-serious word for this. I don't want something spiritual. I want to have fun. Girls just want to have fun. I'm one. I want to
know, and you might not have an answer for this, but I want to know, can you give me an idea of what that would look like? I mean, what is it an energy that you're bringing to a conversation or to your day? Or is it an activity that you're planning, or you just don't know? What does it mean to you to have fun?
Oh, I don't really know. It's sad.
Oh, don't get depressed over it. I think
it's an energy, but I don't even like to make it that self-helpy. I just think approaching the day with the idea, not only that you want to have fun, but that you're allowed to have fun, that it's a good thing to have fun, that it's not anti-activism to have fun. It's not anti-serious to have fun. It's you can, whatever it is that you're doing today. And of course, most of us are not doing much from day to day, but whatever it is, you can try to make it just more enjoyable. I don't even like the word enjoyable. I'm just going to stick to fun. Do something silly if that appeals to you. Or just hang out with people who make you laugh, or try to make them laugh. Laughter would be a big part of it.
Well, speaking of laughter, we watched the new film, Don't Look Up.
I was thinking of that. I was just thinking of that in this context. That is a funny movie.
Which we watched. You could watch it on Netflix, and it's made by Adam McKay. And
hasn't everybody heard of it?
I would think so. But I have to tell you something funny. I was just now I couldn't remember the filmmaker's name, so I just quickly Googled it. And I cannot believe how bad the Rotten Tomatoes score is. Don't believe it. Believe it.
I've listened to reviews. I listened to a reviewer on Pop Culture Happy Hour, which I usually terrible reviews.
Unreal.
It's completely weird. I mean, it is it's been the biggest movie on Netflix worldwide for weeks. So there's that. People obviously like it. Climate scientists, at least the ones I follow on Twitter, are over the moon about it. So excited. What is it about critics who want to put this movie down? I loved it. I loved it as a movie. It was really funny, and horrifying and clever, and yeah, it's a satire. It's not supposed to be a literal, though. To satirize our current political situation is difficult because it's so outlandish that it's hard to get more outlandish. But I just get this feeling that, and maybe this is me being in my bubble, that this is really having an impact. And I think that humor and fun are things that can bring people together about issues. I hope that, it's not just a bubble thing and all the people who already agreed with me and I agreed with still do. But I do feel like this movie has really helped the climate conversation, even though it's not about climate. And somehow everybody, when I first saw it, I think you said the same thing. People are never going to get that this is really about climate, but everybody gets that it's really about climate. People are sort of kind of facing up to the fact that we are in deep shit.
Okay, then I have a question. I am very frequently inspired to some extent, even though it feels very foreign to me, by people who decide to have fun, even if the world is going to shit. I feel like if my resolution or whatever commitment to myself for 2022 was have fun, then I would allow myself to be inspired by that mindset. I think that I'm generally not in that not really in that mindset because I'm so weighed down by headlines and the reality of what's happening to animals. There's just so many marginalized communities, yada, yada, you already know. But this movie, it allows us the opportunity to laugh, but yet I think that the harsh reality in front of us is that a lot of people kind of take that idea of having fun and just ignore everything else. They don't have fun and pay attention to everything else. I'm not sure I'm being totally clear, but...
Well, to me, you're being totally clear. Maybe not to anybody else. And I totally agree. The idea is not escapism. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be a person who says, who fiddles while Rome burns and enjoys their fiddling or whatever. Like, no. I just mean fun is a form of activism. As a form of activism, and obviously it wouldn't be like having fun all the time. There are serious things going on. And maybe, I keep mentioning humor. So I think humor is a really, really huge part of having fun for me, just making things funny. And I think as long as you hold on to your convictions and convey them, I think it can be a form of activism. And it can be a lot more enjoyable a form of activism and potentially more effective a form of activism. But I am definitely not of the, just to have fun and, and hopefully we'll be dead before it gets really bad. No. I totally agree. Okay, here's a serious spoiler alert. So if you haven't seen the movie, skip over the next few minutes. At the very end of the movie, where if you have seen the movie, you know that, it's pretty dire and they are about to be consumed. And the Jennifer Lawrence character says something like, well, at least we tried. And the other one of the other characters says, yeah, we tried damn hard, or something along those lines. And I want to be that person. I want to be the person who can say, no matter what the situation of the world is when I die, that at least I tried. And having fun can be part of that. Does that make any sense? I'm just kind of working this through.
I don't want to bring up my Mr. Holland's Opus story again, because I feel like I just said it recently, but it does make me think of that. Like when all goes to hell and someone says, so-and-so would have fought this, so-and-so would have lost, but so-and-so would have fought it. That is the energy of what we need to be focused on right now. We have to try, but it doesn't mean we need to sacrifice our fun, in the meantime.
No, we need to use our fun.
It can be a way of staying sane. I mean, it can be so. I also think sometimes simple-minded folks who could care less about any social justice issue, could care less about the toll that they leave. They have fun. Sometimes I'm like, why should they and not me? Not that, that sounds so right. Self-righteous. I sound so self-righteous right now. I am aware of that. I'm sorry.
Sometimes when you're right, it's hard not to sound self-righteous.
I am inspired by what you're saying and curious about it. I'm going to find the flow of fun.
Well, I only have one thing to say to that.
What?
Kiss my grits.
On that note, Matt Johnson is an investigator and the press coordinator with the global grassroots animal rights network, Direct Action Everywhere. He's scheduled for trial this month on a felony prosecution, including a charge under Iowa's ag gag laws after working with an Iowa Select Farms truck driver to expose the company's brutal ventilation shutdown mass pig killing in May 2020. He will be joining Marianne right after this.
Hi, our Hen House listeners. I'm Michelle with Phoenix Zones Initiative, an international nonprofit dedicated to advancing the rights, health, and well-being of people, animals, and the planet. It's time to transform medical research and get animals out of laboratories. As fellow Our Hen House supporters, we invite you to register for our free virtual panel, Transforming Medical Research, simulcast on Thursday, January 27th at 7 p.m. Eastern. You'll join our 8 expert panelists as we chart a course to modern ethical research that benefits humans and other animals. We know you don't want to miss this revolutionary event. It's an important step in PZI's work to get animals the same research protections that humans have. So check out our website, phoenixzonesinitiative.org, to find out more and to register. That's phoenixzonesinitiative.org. And thank you for all you do to change the world for animals.
Welcome to our Hen House, Matt.
Thank you so much for having me, Marianne.
I am thrilled to have you because there's a lot going on in your life and in the life of those you work with. And I just want to start out with something that I think a lot of our listeners are kind of familiar with. And that's the fact that Wayne Hsiung, who is, of course, one of the founders of DXC, was recently on trial in North Carolina in a case that involved the rescue of Rain, a baby goat, and that he was ultimately convicted of 2 felonies. Can you tell us a little bit about that trial?
Yeah, that's a really interesting trial. And I think despite the guilty verdicts, I think there's a lot of positive that came from it. And we're feeling pretty optimistic about things moving forward. So this was the first opportunity that we've taken this act of open rescue to the court of law, where we go into places where animals are being abused and we rescue them, we give them the care that they need, and we take whatever consequences often come our way via the legal system that's currently here. And this is the first time we've taken that to a jury of our peers and got a little taste of sort of what that looks like in a courtroom context where the prosecution, argues that these are pieces of property and that they want to exclude conversations about what condition. It doesn't matter what, if the piece of property was damaged a little bit, this sort of a thing. Yeah, we learned a lot, and I think we got a lot of lessons that we can take into my own trial coming up here in January. And the future is bright.
From what I saw, because I was kind of following Twitter feeds about it, there were a lot of objections that were sustained, and there was information that you wanted to be able to get out that you weren't able to. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I flew out to North Carolina specifically for the reason to testify, we thought, and I didn't end up testifying, which is kind of what you're getting at there, largely on these same grounds of saying, it doesn't matter what, the condition of the property, so to speak. And actually what I was going to testify to was that we had actually gone to the same location previously and helped another goat who was even in worse condition. And for the first time, the only time I've ever heard of, the prosecution is trying to quash any conversation about more of the crimes being committed. The judge, and, it's just like, boy, are you guys sure you think this is, is this felony burglary? Is this something to lock somebody up for? Because all of a sudden law enforcement wants no details of no crimes being committed. They're doing everything they can to prevent that from being talked about. And so I didn't end up testifying because it would have all been objected to and so on. We also did get kind of a bad luck of the draw, I think, in terms of a judge who's willing to listen to sort of more novel legal arguments. I think we had pretty valid claims that we should have been able to introduce certain things and talk about the condition the goat was in and so on, and translates into more grounds for appeal. So that's a longer term question. Yeah, I mean, as it is right now, our legal system obviously is very much inclined to give the benefit of the doubt to the status quo of animals as property and so on. But we're kind of figuring out how we can work those angles.
So Wayne received a suspended sentence. Was that a surprise?
Yeah, it was, particularly in that he went in to the sentencing phase and requested jail. And so he's going to the judge and saying like, well, the system is still broken. There's still criminal animal abuse happening everywhere, basically. As long as that is the case, we are going to affirm our right to help these animals. And so, in so many words saying like, you give me probation, probation might not be likely to stick, so maybe we can skip the middle step and do a shorter jail sentence as opposed to 2-year probation. We'll see exactly how that shakes out, but I think that the industry and this judge in particular are wary of creating kind of a martyr effect where
Yeah. Maybe this would be a technique for criminal defendants in general going forward to ask for a jail sentence. Will make the judge think, oh, maybe that's a bad idea. But I think you're exactly right here. I think, I mean, not that I was there, not that I can get it to the head of the judge, but it does seem like a strong argument that this would have gotten even more press than it did if he'd been sent to prison, and a lot more sympathies. So yeah, I can see that being a tactic on the part of the judge. So of course, Wayne's trial was the first in what is expected to be a series of trials in which the right to rescue is at issue, including, of course, your trial, which you alluded to, and which we're going to go into in detail, or the prospective trial. But can you just kind of give us, before we do that, a quick overview of all the stuff that's pending in this right to rescue realm?
Sure, yeah. So I'll see if I can even wrap my head around them all, because it was just a little further back context, in DXC's history, we had been doing open rescues for a while where we're showing our identity, rescuing animals, exposing conditions, etc., for over 3 years with no charges. We're like, man, it's like, where are all these charges? That calculated move behind the scene on the part of the industry swung 180 degrees in the opposite direction. And you do see all these charges coming down. So to kind of list them out here, we have my trial coming right up here in Iowa. This is a rescue of a sick baby piglet who would have been killed within a matter of probably hours or at least days had we not rescued this piglet. And this is part of a broader investigation exposing this horrifying practice of ventilation shutdown and really barbarity that we thought we couldn't even expect from this factory farming industry, quite frankly. The next one, we also have in California, in Petaluma. Petaluma Poultry is the supplier in Sonoma County. We're expecting that trial to happen in some case this year. In that case, we literally have the county's own animal services office is agreeing with us that this is criminal animal abuse inside this facility, and yet the prosecutor still ignores that and still goes after, quite drastically goes after the people who exposed it. So I think that's a pretty positive and promising case for us there. In Utah, there are felony charges pending there in relation to Smithfield piglet rescue. And there are some other cases that are less prominent and so on, but those are the... sorry. Actually, I forgot one more. At Ridgeland Farms is a dog breeding and research facility where we rescued 2 beagles from in 2017. And that one, for some reason, 4 years later, the charges just came there. So those would be 4 that we're looking at roughly in the next year.
Yeah, so maybe it is a change in the part of the industry, a change in strategy. And so that one was still chargeable and they decided to revive it. Interesting. It'll be interesting to see the difference in press attention to a case involving dogs as opposed to a case involving farm animals. All right, so let's get back to the case that you're involved in, which is due to go to trial later in January, though, of course, there's COVID, so it's been delayed before, and who knows? We can't settle that. We can still talk about the case itself. And can you first just kind of set the scene for us regarding the rescue that resulted in these charges? If I understand, this was very early on in the pandemic, and you found out this information. You talked about it. You found out about ventilation shutdown, which I imagine most of our listeners have heard about. But you found out about that it was going on at Iowa Select Farms. And how did that all come about?
Yes, so we actually found out via a truck driver for Iowa Select Farms, who's now public. His name is Lucas Walker. I think that is something that's really powerful and really telling that, this isn't the genesis of this was not animal rights activists saying that they object to what's happening inside of these facilities. It's somebody who sees it all day, every day, and it is in fact part of this industry and is surrounded, all the social pressure, the career pressure, all his where he was born and raised, everything was pushing him in the direction of like, this is good and wholesome and the right thing to do. And in spite of all of that, he's looking at what's happening around him. He's looking at the crowded conditions in these facilities. Not only that, but the lack of any sort of enforcement of company policies or of the law at all levels, trying to get some enforcement from the government. When all of that fails, you have this employee of this factory farming company doing the last thing you would ever imagine in a million years and reaching out to animal rights activists and saying, hey, I can't in good conscience be quiet on this one. So, I want to let you know what's going on. We'll go from there. And originally it was rampant systemic crowding that is just business as usual. And that was how we started talking. And then timing of it was such that with COVID hitting and the slaughterhouse outbreaks that were happening across the country where slaughterhouses are shut down, and then you have a quote unquote supply chain back up in the form of millions of living, feeling animals that the industry isn't sure what to do with. And the industry then does as it always does and follows the path that benefits the bottom line. So the least costly method in their calculation was to kill all these animals, and they use this ventilation shutdown method. Utterly horrifying. I will leave it at that for right now. But as long as it is something that's happening, we're very gratified that with the help of Lucas, we were able to expose that. And no surprise, the industry has responded the way they have.
I reiterate, what a hero. You're all heroes. I mean, you all do this work. But when you're embedded in a culture that is going to think that you've done the wrong thing, that takes a lot for a person to do that. So kudos to him. Tell us about the investigation and the rescue itself. And you alluded to how horrifying this is. And I know it's very horrifying. And I don't like to hide how horrifying things are. But at the same time, I don't want people to feel that they have to turn this off because they can't bear to listen anymore. So just find that sweet spot, okay? Most people listening are kind of familiar. But I don't want them to not know how extra bad this was.
Yeah. So ventilation shutdown, this process for killing pigs, it involves, first of all, they specially retrofit these facilities for this process. So they seal up all of the air vents. So there's no heat, no air coming in or out. And if there is any sort of, often there's like a system underneath where their waste goes. In this case, they actually move them to what usually would be used for chickens, chicken factory farming. So there was no area underneath there. So anyways, you just get basically a sealed box out of these industrial sheds. And then you load in usually thousands of pigs. In this case, it was thousands of pigs, fit them in there. And over a series of hours, pump in heat and steam. And yeah, I mean, the audio, hearing that, you actually couldn't really see a lot because of the steam. Yeah, I mean, the audio is horrifying as anything you can pretty much imagine.
Without giving away any confidential information, how did you get in? How did this all come about?
Lucas was 99% of the relevant intel with that. And he has a lot of friends and has a lot of connections there within the company, having worked there for several years. Yeah, through the managers and so on, he was sort of able to piece together what was happening, where and when, with scouting on our part of kind of, we were in the vicinity, myself and a team of activists were scouting things out for our own sake. So we kind of, worked together, and it was a 3-week process of kind of educated guesses and really just diligently sitting there and kind of like micromanaging, like, okay, what's the right way to phrase this text message to try to like figure out what's going on. So we're like very actively strategizing because it's a very, obviously a very high stakes situation. And it was certainly not a given that we were going to be able to capture this at any point. That we don't know if they're going to stop. We don't know if they're going to get real quiet about it and not be so loose with the facts and so on. So it was a really unique and high stakes and ultimately pretty gratifying experience.
Now, did you get into the facility yourself, or were you getting the information from the people or filming that was being done inside?
We, as in like myself and DXE folks, did the on the ground going inside of there and so on. And Lucas was intel, information.
So tell us about the rescue.
Yeah, so as part of this investigation, it wasn't just literally the ventilation shutdown act itself. We wanted to investigate and expose sort of the supply chain as a whole. And so in addition to pigs being killed via ventilation shutdown, and these would be, older pigs that are close to slaughter age and weight, that was happening with. But on the other end of the supply chain there, or, air quotes on supply chain, the piglets were, they changed their standards for piglets. Now, they normally are killing plenty of piglets as it is because just cost benefit to the brutal logic of the market. If a pig has a broken leg or something like that, they're going to kill them. In this instance, because of the supply chain issues, they had a standard that was much less forgiving, let's say, with piglets, where it was basically any sort of ailment, any piglet that's not perfect was being killed. And so we were investigating that. We had hidden camera footage of this, what's called a Zephyr gun area. And this is basically, again, I'll try to parse the detail, but not too many details. Basically like a bolt gun, but a smaller version of that. And it has a rounded off tip as opposed to a more pointed tip. And that is what's used to kill piglets. And they make it that way because obviously, a lot of people are not real fond of having to kill piglets. It's a little less queasy on people to do that if it's not like penetrating. It's just on the outside of their head. So that's what that was. So we captured footage of that, and we rescued Gilly. Was sick, had an infection on her face, and had some scrapes on her body. So we quite likely she would have been killed, and so we were able to save her from this facility, and we were able to capture some footage that's also pretty brutal and hard to walk of that Zephyr gun area, and knowingly, openly talked about that, published that, and the authorities went ahead and used that evidence to bring the case.
Is there any question that Gilly would have been killed? I mean, she was slotted to be killed before you rescued her.
Yeah, by the standards that they go by, and they're killing many piglets every day, and there's really no way of she would have like miraculously healed. The infection on her face was going to get worse, and I'm not my word for it. This is the veterinarians who have looked at her. Yeah, it was going to happen, and that actually is a useful thing for storytelling purposes, saving an animal from the brink of death, of imminent death. But for a legal matter as well, one of the ways that we can undermine this is to say, like, well, this is, this supposed property had no value in terms of monetary value to the industry. And so we're optimistic that at some point that's a legal argument that's really going to catch on. And we think this is a pretty strong case.
It's interesting because it's a somewhat different situation than that of Rain, the baby goat, who you really had to establish that there was a health problem, not that he was about to go to slaughter. So there's a little bit of a wrinkle there, which I find kind of interesting. And without disclosing any confidential information, just giving us a general idea, where's Gilly now?
Gilly is at a farm animal sanctuary, and I've got some updates from time to time. So she's living a life that your average dog, that is very much. I know the caretaker that she has is thrilled and has that same bond that ordinary the rest of the world would have, like with dogs and cats. And it's the way it's supposed to be.
Nice. And I just want to say what I know you know this, but to remind the audience, when you said these were the piglets, the other pigs were grown pigs. They're still not even full grown when they're sent to slaughter. They're like 4 to 6 months. I just wanted to remind people that we're not talking about pigs who have lived a long life at that point. So how did the court case come about? How were you arrested and what were you charged with?
So that was really telling that this was less than 24 hours after this investigation was released, with the story by Glenn Greenwald and a lot of other outlets picked it up. That came out in the afternoon on that day. The following morning, my hotel room is raided at dawn the day following this release, and I'm taken into custody. And you look at this situation, and we've been able to review body camera footage from the police officer who did the investigation, the sheriff's deputy, and it was really a mad scramble for them that day. Right when that investigation came out, they're tracking me down. They are not content to file charges and have like an arrest warrant out there and then let this process play out. They're going to come get me right now. And the reason they're going to come get me right now is not because there's any kind of a flight risk. They know we're very much the opposite end of the spectrum, very open, very public. We're going to do this, I'm not going anywhere. And in fact, I received a call from a agent with the Iowa Department of Criminal Investigations after that investigation came out, telling me like, hey, there's this arrest warrant, which an arrest warrant doesn't mean that you're in contempt of court at that moment and you need to come in right then. It means that if they come into contact with you, you're going to be arrested. And so I was, okay, I understand. We kind of saw this coming, like, it's all above board, good to go. Like, I'll within like a day or two or something like that, like, let me get my stuff figured out. I'll come in, it'll be all fine. No, they didn't want to do that. They had a point to make, and they, wanted to make an example of me. They have followed the path that they did. I should mention too, subsequent to that, they have, in terms of making an example of me and really trying to chill this sort of speech activity, Iowa Select Farms got in touch with the FBI. The FBI then goes and gets in touch with Lucas Walker, this truck driver who's, I would now count as a close friend of mine. And they're in touch with him and coercing him under the ambiguous threat that he might be facing charges. They're trying to coerce him, trying to literally get him to sell me drugs, trying to get him to wear a wire to come and talk to me to see if he can get some dirt on me of some sort. And interestingly, those FBI agents weren't interested in the details of our actual work. They were like, how many pigs did they steal and how much was it worth? And, it's like the so-called burglary is of no interest to them. And the only interest to them and by proxy, the industry is to find some other way to undermine us. If they can get lucky in their view and be like, oh yeah, could you sell Matt some cocaine? That'd be the best thing that could ever happen to them, to undermine us in that way. So it's just really sleazy, disgusting stuff, obviously, but we can use that to our advantage with, communications through press and through what we're doing right now, that sort of thing.
Potential legal action as well. But speaking of legal action, tell us what you were charged with. And let's talk specifically about ag-gag, because I understand you were charged with under the Iowa ag-gag statute. And Iowa has this wild history with ag-gag. They keep passing statutes, and then the statutes get ruled unconstitutional, and then they immediately pass another one. Or I think they've even passed another one before they knew it was going to be ruled unconstitutional, the second one. So they passed a new one before it was, I don't know. It's all very complicated. I have trouble following it. So just tell us what you were charged with, and just give us a little idea of how much it means to them to have an ag-gag statute to charge you under.
So the most serious charge is a burglary charge, and this would be, the removing of the quote unquote property. And I also have a electronic eavesdropping charge, or also known as a wiretap charge, related to placing hidden recording devices. And then actually subsequent to this, a few months later, when I was in Iowa, on the property on the outside at the same facility, I have been charged under this one of the 4 ag-gag laws. And the ag-gag law that I'm charged under, I'm the first person charged under that law. I was also the explicit reason that law even came to pass. So this was after, sorry, I know there's a lot of
this is complicated. I don't blame you. Like, it's hard. Yeah. It's hard.
After the ventilation shutdown investigation comes out, 12 days later, the Iowa legislature has drafted and passed through both chambers of the Congress and the state, and signed by the governor into law this new ag-gag charge, where Iowa State Senator Ken Rosenboom in the legislature explicitly talking about the work that we're doing, and so gets this law passed that's cracking down on what they're calling agricultural trespass. And then months later, I become the first person charged under that law. Yeah, we'll see. They've now four ag-gag laws, and 2 of them have been in various stages of being challenged and overturned. And obviously, the industry wields a ton of power, so they're just going to keep doing it, I guess.
Iowa is Iowa. It was an interesting state to pick. All right, so that kind of tells us what's going on. And of course, the trial is coming up, or will get postponed, but will come up at some point. But I think people have heard about the legal cases and identified DXE with these legal cases, or have started to hear about them. But I'd kind of like to explore with you the overall strategy of how these cases fit into your goals, and maybe also then talk a little bit about the other ways you pursue change. But let's talk about how the legal cases. Tell us about the right to rescue and how it can support not just getting one animal out and not having to go to prison for it, but how you really believe this can turn into systemic change.
It really cuts to the fundamental legal question of how we classify living, feeling individuals and challenging the property status. And there's actually already legal precedent out there for this sort of thing. And there are many states where you can, for example, break a window in a car to save a dog on a hot day if the dog is locked inside of there. And even stronger than that, that legal norm is very much a social norm. Even if you were in a situation where that wasn't lawful, that wouldn't fly. The public would not be in support of going after somebody who saves a dog's life. And so we're taking that same idea and taking it to the court of law. We're exploring ways that we could try to make that pass with a jury and set a legal precedent, as well as a political precedent. So even if on the books it still says X, Y, it still says animals are property, or a straightforward reading of it would go against us. If there's enough public pressure behind it, saying like, this ventilation shutdown thing is horrifying, rescuing and dying, it's something that the public can get behind, even if our legal system lags behind. But over the course of time, you see that, sometimes the legal system is slightly ahead of the big public outrage. They kind of move in tandem. It's a big vehicle to drive that change forward. And once you get a lot of people taking action, and once you get a lot of people sort of challenging these laws, you make it something that the system can no longer bear that burden, and something's got to give here when draconian laws are delegitimized, and that's when you see real change happen. So
tell us also about the other strategies that DXE is using with this same goal of creating systemic change. And, we'll talk a little bit about your goals or your vision, but let's talk a little bit about strategy first. There are legislative strategies, other strategies.
Maybe I'll pull it back sky level, that kind of everything that we're doing is sort of informed by the overall theory of change which what DXE aims to do is to follow in the footsteps of successful social movements of the past by building a mass movement of ordinary people taking action. So it's as much as I think there's validity to all sorts of approaches for sure. So it's distinct from something that is educational, for example, like handing out like leaflets and saying, hey, here's some information, do with it what you will. And it's distinct from something like technology with clean meats and so on. Obviously, that's very much a force for good. What we're trying to do is to connect with people and inspire them to take action in some way. So whatever we're doing, whether it's through legal cases, whether it's through legislation, which we've had some big successes there, those are actually more of a means. They're certainly powerful ends in and of themselves, but in the big picture, they're really means to an end of getting a million people marching on Washington for animal rights. That's the big payoff down the road that we're setting ourselves up for that long-term shift.
Yeah, trying to reach people is certainly something that you work at a lot. And somewhat famously, I think these are the things that DXE might be known for to people who aren't that familiar with your work. You have used what some might call publicity stunts. I'm not sure if you object to that term, to bring attention to what is happening on factory farms. And I really wanted to talk to you about your appearance on Fox Business. I know that was a while ago, but it's pretty entertaining. So can you just tell us that story?
Yeah, so this was inspired by activist group called the Yes Men, who are still kind of doing their thing. They seemed like they were a lot more prominent like 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I was able to, through some, I just won't give away all my secrets, but I'll give away a little bit of them that involves a domain name that is very similar to smithfieldfoods.com with maybe a couple extra sneaky letters, smithfieldfoodsus.com that directs to smithfieldfoods.com, and you can create an email account that looks very much like the actual person who is their communications person. And did this it was right around a year ago at the time that we're recording this right now, right before Christmas, when they perhaps educated guests that maybe they don't have their normal people in who are more savvy, and maybe they got a fill-in person. Took a shot at that and was able to slip one under the radar there and got on the show Fox Business with Maria Bartiromo for the full 6 minutes. I was acting as if I was the CEO, Dennis Organ, of Smithfield Foods, and talking about the horrible things that this industry is complicit in, and doing so in a way that is like enough under the radar that she, I was able to get through it and not get cut off, even though by the end, she seemed to have her suspicions when I'm talking about this industry. Our industry poses a serious threat in bringing on the next pandemic, and there's all these environmental harms, and a unique, novel thing to do. And publicity stunt. It's by definition, it's what it is. Maybe that has a negative connotation to it, but we want attention on these issues, obviously, and that one was quite sympathetic to a broad range of people.
No, I think that one played well. Sometimes they don't play as well, I think. And I'm just wondering, how centralized are the decisions of what activist actions, things, publicity stunts or other kinds of actions? Does DXE have over what its name should be put on?
On paper, there's technically there's very little to that. We have our organizing values, and if people, and which I would say are pretty broad, and a lot of them are pretty like common sense. If you're kind of an animal rights activist person, if you already believe in animal rights and you want to go do something, you can rightfully call yourself DXE if it meets, if it's nonviolent and animal centered and so on. So technically, it's very wide open that anybody can go and do something without really consulting with anybody and rightfully say they're part of DXE. In practice, particularly with something that's more complicated or more costly or more risky legally, there's going to be more of a process to that. It's not a good idea to do things if you don't have a good communications plan to get press and a good, legal support system behind you and so on. It kind of depends on the specific thing, but it's a very good kind of consensus-based process. It doesn't, usually. Very rarely do things come down to like a hard and fast, like, all right, we're going to have these 5 people cast a specific vote. It's, a lot of smart, passionate people coming together and just figuring out what the consensus idea is.
So you've never been in the position of having to disavow something that a DXE activist has done. Can you imagine that happening?
So if it was something that was like a clear violation of DXE values, so if somebody, said they were DXE and they were out like punch somebody in the face or something.
Right, if they did something violent, yeah.
Yeah, so that would be that. And if it's more something that is in alignment with DXE's values, but maybe not advisable, or
that's what I was thinking of. Yeah,
that one we pretty much don't, because the idea is, not necessarily that every particular action is done the best way with the best optics and so on. We also, want to give people that freedom and that flexibility to be creative, to try things. And we want to support our activists. And so if it's like the right values, but maybe not a wise choice, like you kind of want to like stand with them and not, maybe privately, there's a lot of those conversations. Publicly, I don't know, it's kind of a case by case basis, but if within DXE values, pretty much wouldn't want to publicly go against them, I don't think.
Yeah, that all makes sense. And it seems like it's probably something that's much easier to say than it is to do. I imagine there's a lot of hard work that goes into making these decisions. So I appreciate how difficult it is because, let's face it, you're trying to save animals, but you're working with people. And, people are frequently a pain in the ass. So, not that I'm saying any DXE activists are, but you know what I mean. So that is so enlightening. And I wish we had more time to talk about exactly what the life of a DXE activist is like. Maybe we can talk about it a little bit on our bonus content. But I did say I was going to ask you something, and I think it's a good question to close with because it's something that's so hard for so many of us because we are so embedded in a world that is so far from what we think the world should be. But I do think it's important to hold a vision. And I'm just curious to know, what is your vision? Like if you really got to succeed at everything, what would it look like?
As ambitious as a vision of like ending animal agriculture is and rescuing whatever animals remain and having them live a life of sanctuary, that's incredible, obviously, and such a good thing for the world. Not that I need to convince your audience of that. I think that actually what's even more than that is what we can even do proactively. And this is, getting far into the future there. But if we really embody what does it mean to treat animals as equals and to look at them as we do with vulnerable dogs or cats or vulnerable humans, for that matter, we look at things like animals suffering in the wild. That's extremely complicated. And I don't know, to say like, well, boy, how are we going to stop the gazelles from being eaten by the lions? And this is going to be like fodder for anybody that wants to come after me on it. But it's, in the long-term vision, I think that once we get to that place of where we actually do, by law have animals, species equality, then that just shifts the whole paradigm. The whole conversation is like, oh, okay, now we bring in the biologists and the animal behaviorists and so on, and they're not trying to make money off these animals. They're not trying to exploit them. They're trying to say like, okay, what is the best net good? And things like farm machinery equipment that drives, every anti-vegan hater on social media. Oh, what about the mice that are killed in the fields? There are things that they can do. They can put,
of course,
devices on that emit high-pitched noises that cause animals to flee, and then so they're not harmed. In that process, you can build like overpasses on roads so that animals aren't being hit. So much that we can do proactively to help animals. And so, I don't know. That's maybe my individual kind of wrinkle on it that I think a lot of people aren't thinking about. And by the way, I think we don't have to, because a lot of people will say like, oh, nature, you don't want to mess with nature. It's beautiful as it is and so on. And I think to that, it's just like, there's a pretty broad agreement amongst the animal rights community, like get rid of animal agriculture, get to animal personhood. Then from there, then we can have those really interesting conversations. And maybe we can do some stuff that seems like sci-fi. You're talking about it right now, but maybe in 50 years, it won't be.
I love that answer. I love your vision. I love that that it's a vision and we can't quite see it clearly in all its aspects, but that is not a reason not to hold it. So thanks for sharing it with us. I can imagine that. I think we all feel at risk in kind of expressing our deepest ideas about our relationship with animals because it's so far off, but it's so far off from what reality is, but it may not be that far off from what most people think, because we all know that people's thinking about animals is very skewed from their behavior. So I love that you're articulating that. And that's what we all have to do. We have to think about how it should be, even though it may be hard to imagine it at the moment. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think, and we've seen historically when social change happens, it often happens way faster than anybody could imagine. And the gay rights movement to gay marriage was something that 30 years ago was, to think that we'd be where we are today in the U.S. At least was unfathomable.
Unimaginable.
And that's what we've seen. And once you start getting the momentum behind it, you get the Lucas Walkers of the world on your side, and everybody starts looking around like, why are we defending this? What's going on? Like, let's get this stuff behind us. It happen pretty quick. So thanks so much.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. It's just a house of cards. The weird thing about this is that most everybody kind of agrees with us in principle. It's just, they just keep doing something else. So yeah, it could fall to pieces. Thanks so much for all you're doing to make that house of cards fall, and for joining us today, Matt. It's really been a pleasure.
And thank you, Marianne.
If you like what you're listening to, and I hope you do, then please consider taking a minute out of your day today to leave us a friendly review. You can do it on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify or Stitcher or on Facebook or wherever you listen to podcasts or wherever you're listening to this. The more we get out there, the more our henhouse will be in front of people's eyeballs when they're putting in search terms in their podcasts, and the more we could join forces together to elevate the voices of the animals and change the world for them. So thank you so much in advance for leaving us a friendly review.
Anxieties are rising. Our first story this week is from one of my favorite places it could be from, because it's about marketing. It's about from the Meeting Place site. So for, a meat industry publication, but it's about marketing. This is a column, A Marketer's Lens by Danette Amstein. And so she specifically writes about what are the problems or opportunities for people who want to sell dead animals. And the name of this column is How to Combat 3 Critical Threats to Your Meat Business in 2022. And 2 of them I don't really care about. And those are supply chain disruption and the automated e-commerce loop. I hope they cause problems, but But it's the first one, the very first one that I think is nice to see. Plant and cell-based meat alternatives. Let's take a look at this imminent threat facing today's meat industry. And she points out that it's not a secret that alternative meat companies have poured a lot of money into advertising. And she advises her readers that, you don't have to outspend them, and you probably can't, given the deep pockets of their activist backers. Yeah, right. We have more money than the meat industry. Dream on. Wouldn't that be nice if that were true? But the dollars you do spend need to get you in front of the right sets of eyes and remind them why the real deal is so much better. It's not reminding them. It would be lying to them, because it ain't. And she points out that our future lies in the hands and taste buds of flexitarians and Gen Zs. I love that, because she's already giving up at least part of this market, because flexitarians are people who, at least don't eat animals all the time. She points out that retailers will only be able to do so much to help. Why would retailers want to help? They're not in the meat business. They're in the food business. Anyway, retailers will only be able to do so much to help. They probably would be, They probably do favor the meat industry for a million different reasons. All right, I'm going to finish this sentence now. Retailers will only be able to do so much to help because they feel compelled to allocate space in the meat case for plant-based alternatives because of market pressures, i.e., they put plant-based alternatives in the meat case because they make more money when they do it, because people buy it. Oh, isn't that just a disgrace, these evil market pressures? She also points out that the best defense is a good offense. So the work we do to offset plant-based messaging now will help us fend off the cell-based alternatives too. Yeah, maybe not. They're so worried. You gotta love to see it. All right. Scanning the horizon for activism in 2022. This is from our favorite, Hannah Thompson-Weedman, who writes the Animal Ag Watch column for Meeting Place. And she points out that animal rights activists that would be you, have been busier than ever in 2021, staging protests, releasing quote-unquote undercover video campaigns. Why is it quote-unquote undercover? Like, they are undercover. Pushing for new legislation and escalating pressure campaigns targeting our restaurant, retail, food service brand partners. Actually, restaurants, retails, and food service aren't your brand partners, honey. They're just in business. And, they'll sell your product or they'll sell somebody else's. They don't really care. Groups have described the many societal shifts happening because of the COVID-19 pandemic as a tipping point for the animal rights movement. Yay! That's good news. And are hoping to capitalize on the many changes of the past 2 years to push for an end to animal agriculture. That's almost a concession, almost a concession that things have shifted, things have changed. And now, an end of animal agriculture is looking kind of realistic. She does think that there are emerging threats. One is cybersecurity. This is a wild one. There was that huge cyber attack on JBS, which is the biggest meat company in the world, this Brazilian company. As she points out, she's not claiming that we did it. While that incident was not connected to animal rights activism, activists were quick to applaud the effort on social media. Well, I don't know. And could certainly be looking to replicate it. Yeah, I don't know how, but if that's happening, it's news to me. If activists looking to disrupt animal agriculture can align with cyber criminals seeking a payday, the ramifications could be huge. All right, so she's worried about that apparently very unlikely scenario. Insider threats are also, this is more realistic. Insider threats. Animal rights extremists have invested considerably in, quote, whistleblower outreach over the past year by taking out ads in newspapers calling for farm employees to contact them and launching new websites for plant employees. Don't you find it funny they call them plants? I just think it's so funny. That's by they mean slaughterhouses. They call slaughterhouses plants. Oh, the world is weird. For plant employees to offer, quote, tips on their employer's operations. Well, I wasn't aware that these ads were going out. I hope this is true. You never can really trust her, but, it might be true. And certainly there have been some important activist activities that have been instigated by employees. Let's hope that continues. She points out that these quote-unquote whistleblowers may be sympathetic to the activists' cause. Well, that's a concession right there, isn't there? Like, they're the people who really know what's going on inside these quote-unquote plants. And maybe they're sympathetic. Interesting. Why would they be sympathetic? Or they might have an ulterior motive to take down their employer. But sympathetic, that implies that she thinks maybe they actually look at what's happening to these animals and are going, oh, geez, this is awful, which I imagine they are. Regardless of the circumstances, if they have genuine concerns about animal welfare or worker health and safety, they need to be reported to a legitimate authority. Yeah, right. That'll do a lot. She does say that employers should be mindful of employee morale over the next year and should make sure that anybody witnessing anything that should not be happening should report it to the right people. That means the people who own the slaughterhouse. And they can be confident that action will be taken. Yeah, maybe not, since the actions are actually things that are part of policy most of the time. So, yeah, not so much. And she does also point out that tactics will continue on social media and that one main focus of such efforts this year was sustainability as activist groups took advantage of public interest in the climate. It is so awful how you people are taking advantage just because people care about the climate. Oh, poor guys, poor guys. All right, this is a little article that was sent to me by listener Nancy Manifold. It's from the UK, and it's just a funny little article, but a really cool development that this is from Oxfordshire, and it's talking about the council. Is it a town council or a city council? I'm not sure what the exact geographic designation is. But the ruling Liberal Democrat, Labour, and Green Party alliance in the Oxfordshire Council passed a rule prohibiting the offering of any meat or dairy products. You know, this is a council meeting, which apparently occur 6 times a year. So they're saying, all right, the meals at those well, I don't know why they have meals, but the meals at those council meetings, maybe they're full day or something, have to be vegan. Oh my God. The conservatives, who are not in the majority, of course, said that this was dictatorial and individuals should be left to decide meals for themselves. They don't have to eat this meal. I just want to make this clear. They don't have to. They can eat whatever they want. They're just not going to be given whatever they want. The conservative opposition believes that veganism is a choice that should be respected, but they're choking on having to say that. But it is not something that should be rammed down the throats of vegetarians and meat eaters. Isn't that nice? They're sticking up for vegetarians. A carrot, not a stick approach should be employed. I mean, one could say that they are taking a carrot approach by feeding everybody carrots and other plant-based delicacies. For the council to force all catering to become plant-based is wrong. It has got to be gradual. That's an interesting comment, isn't it? It's like they think, well, it's going to happen, but let's wait 20 or 30 years. That's pretty funny. Thank you for sending that. And this is just a tiny little comment. But, recently, I think we mentioned to you that Jasmine had taken over a local Rochester Twitter account and featured all kind of vegan food and sanctuaries for, I think, 9 or 10 days on that, not a Twitter account, an Instagram account. So when she featured the grass-fed butchers, which we've spoken about before, which is a all plant-based butcher shop here in Rochester. This is what Doghouse Architect commented. Use of the word butcher in this context is gentrified nonsense appropriation and is demeaning to actual butchers. These people have very thin skins. And that's it for this week's Rising Anxieties.
Well, that's it for this week's show. As always, if you like the podcast and if you're able, we invite you to join the flock at ourhenhouse.org/donate for $10 a month or $100 a year. Or you can make whatever donation you're comfortable with. Another way to support us is to leave us a fabulous review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts, or like us on Facebook. You could also leave us a review there or follow us on Twitter or Instagram at Our Hen House. If you shop on Amazon, you can use Amazon Smile using Our Hen House as your favorite charity. And of course, tell your friends about us. If you're one of our listeners who already supports us, thank you so much. And thank you to my co-host, Marianne Sullivan, and to Jen Riley for her work in producing this podcast, to composer Michael Herron for the music. Thanks to Eric Montgomery of the Podcast Haven for his work editing this podcast, and to our production assistant, Jocelyn Martinez, and to Vicky Bichler for her membership and administrative help. We'd also like to give a shout out to the amazing Veronica Kalinska, who designed our brand new logos and other graphics. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode, so don't forget to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Jasmine Singer. Thank you so much for tuning in.